I started 𝒉𝒂𝒄𝒉 essentially to show that today with digital tools, you can build media platforms much more cheaply. Government would like to have more powers to itself, particularly those governments which have an authoritarian streak anyway. It was the DIG range who had come to arrest the student union president, 𝒉𝒃 Tripathi. He thought I look presidential enough, so I got arrested. Sanjay Gandhi was running the emergency, at least in Delhi and surrounding states. It's a crack in the world of information which they think they should control. And any crack seems to be a danger for them. It's a sign of weakness, not a sign of strength.
Welcome to CPIM Digital. Today we have amongst us renowned journalist, Comrade Prabir Purakayastha, the chief editor of 𝒉𝒂𝒄𝒉. We are extremely honored to have him amongst us, and we shall ask him a few questions to learn about his experience as a journalist in the long career that he has had. Of course, besides being a journalist, he has another very, a very intriguing a side to him. That is, he's also an activist. He's an activist of science and an activist of the free software movement. But since we do not have much time today, we will not be able to talk about those aspects of his life. Today we shall concentrate mostly on journalism and Prabir Purakayastha as a journalist. Welcome to CPIM Digital, sir.
Let me just interject on that. I was a practicing engineer for a long period.
Yes.
From 1980s to, in fact, up to 2017. I had a professional engineering career in which I worked on computer controls initially, and then of course control systems all became computers, as did most of the other tools that you and I use. So that is what I started with, and I remain also still professionally a technologist and an engineer, along with being a science activist, software activist, as well as a journalist.
But somehow your persona as a journalist has, I think, overtaken everything else. That is what has made you famous, that has made you a household name.
That is what the government made me famous for. That is not what I sought. Okay, I started 𝒉𝒂𝒄𝒉 essentially to show that today with digital tools, you can build media platforms much more cheaply. And a lot of people who are activists who really do not find a voice in mainstream media could therefore do that as an easy way of setting up communications with the people. So that is the whole purpose of starting 𝒉𝒂𝒄𝒉, not as a digital platform by itself, but really as an example of what could be done. And I felt that that's something people did not know, that this could be done very cheaply and very easily with today's technology. That took some more time for people to understand, because they still were enamored with Facebook and YouTube, and they thought that this is all that you really need. You don't need a digital platform. Now, of course, we have different digital platforms everywhere which understand the importance of giving a voice to a certain opinion, certain sections of people, therefore the ability to create that at low cost. And I think that's something I started as essentially as an example of what could be done, and it became after that my identity, because I also thought the other element of what this should be is also to cover what people are saying, not what people we think are saying. Therefore, look at the movements, the working class movements, the peasant movement, particularly the farmers' movements, and give them a voice. Why do the women, when they come out to struggle, what are their opinions? So not what the anchor wants to say. So what, when you have a mic and you say people want to say, no, give the people a voice. So that was also the attempt to look at movements and give the movements a voice, so they can say why they are here, why they are on a strike, why they are on a march. So those are the other things I think that's what the government didn't really like, that we are giving people a voice and movements a voice, particularly the farmers' movements, also the working class movements, the strikes that took place. So all of this is, I think, what made the government feel that we are people who do not belong to be outside.
And I think even though this was not your prime objective of starting NewsClick, but somehow it took off, and it became very popular amongst people who were looking for a different kind of news, not the usual that is served to us, but they were looking for a different kind of news, and the best place to go for it is the NewsClick. Just like we have another one by V. Sainath, we go to Pari. Similarly, if we are looking for an authentic piece on something, then it is always the NewsClick. Now, I think you are the only person in India, in this 140 million people that we have, you are probably the only one who went to jail once earlier in 75 under a draconian law like the visa, and then again in 2023 under another draconian law like the UAPA. How would you describe these two similarities or these situations?
Well, they're both what I've described in my book as declared, and I would not say an undeclared emergency, but definitely a distortion of democracy. So in that sense, that there are similarities as well as dissimilarities. But the commonality has always been the rulers don't like people who disagree with them. That's well known. The question is what are the instruments they have to control this? Generally you control it through normal channels. You allow them some voice, allow them to propagate their views, allow them to write, and then, do other instruments to try and contain them. But under emergency, the question was, those things did not apply. If the government didn't like you, they could put you in jail, and then there was no so-called due process of law. All that it meant is that a magistrate, in fact, additional district magistrate, was empowered, then signed every 4 months to sign that he feels that you should still be kept inside for another 4 months. So there was no...
It depended entirely on the magistrate.
Effectively on what the government told him to do. And if you remember the famous judgment that came at that time, which said, under emergency, we have the fundamental rights. We have fundamental rights, but we do not have the right to move the courts for its implementation. Okay? Which is what was struck down finally only recently. But that position, that under emergency A, you could not enforce your fundamental rights, was the key issue that gave this draconian powers to the government, that it didn't have to go to court or anything. Now, under UAPA, as well as other draconian laws which are there, like PMLA for instance, they have empowered the state to a large extent. At the same time, judicial review still holds. So you can go to court, but it is difficult. So we have to see how the jurisprudence develops on that, and whether this continues or it changes, we have to see. It will depend a lot, a lot of this will depend how the people react to it. Because I don't think if the judges act in a vacuum. I do not think the government also acts in a vacuum, but the government would like to have more powers to itself, particularly those governments which have an authoritarian streak anyway. But a lot of it depends on how the people react to this and to what extent that the judges react to that. And I think those are also the imponderables in the situation. I do not believe that draconian laws of any kind can be used against the people in this way for too long without a reaction. And those who think they can get away with this saw in the recent elections that people actually have not taken a very good view of the way things have happened, the way PMLA, for instance, has been used against political opposition, how once you change the party and join the BJP, then all the cases seem to get dropped. Ajit Pawar was the most corrupt person in India. And then he became somebody who was acceptable. The minute he changed, he left Sharad Pawar's party and joined the BJP. So, or he broke his party, to be more correct, and joined the BJP alliance. So all of this will show that ultimately it is not the laws, it is not the government alone, or not the courts alone that works, but also how the people react to it. And I believe the guarantor of all of this in the last resort are the people of this country. And I do have enormous belief that yes, you can do this for some time, you can do this to some people, but not for all times, not for all people. I don't think this will last. Or this kind of regime that we have where some people in power believe they can do what they want and the laws can be twisted to meet that ends, I don't think that can last too long.
What is it about you that you drive, authoritarian regimes the wrong way? Indira Gandhi was supposed to be or described as a strong woman. She had imposed visa on you. Once again, Narendra Modi is perceived to be a strong Prime Minister, and he has got the UAPA on you. What is it about you that you rub them the wrong way?
I think, the first was an accident almost, though I was very much a part of the strike during which we had stopped Sanjay Gandhi's wife, Maneka Gandhi, from going to class. We hadn't physically stopped her, but we had told her there is a strike and therefore she should not go to class. She actually went back. It was also, the strike was also the expulsion of his SFI leader who was actually engaged to be married to me at that time. We did get married after the emergency, 𝒃𝒊𝒂𝒏𝒏𝒆𝒍. So it was on her expulsion that the strike took place. But actually Binder, who was the DIG range, who had come to arrest the Students' Union president, DP Tripathi, he thought I looked presidential enough, so I got arrested for whatever reason, because we were sitting in the place where the incident had taken place. Of course, the reason of that is, again, you have to look at the larger emergency picture. Sanjay Gandhi was running the emergency, at least in Delhi and surrounding states, and in the Shah Commission's report, he's talked about, the Prime Minister's house. Now, he didn't have an official position, so how does the administrative authorities describe in the reports Sanjay Gandhi? So this is Prime Minister's house, which was a pseudonym, a name for Sanjay Gandhi. Okay? Now you will find in the Shah Commission's report all the internal documents talk about the Prime Minister's house is involved. My case, the Prime Minister's house is involved. It means Sanjay Gandhi. Because Sanjay Gandhi was furious that his wife could not attend class during emergency. So that was the issue. The SFI had called a strike on Ashok Lata's expulsion at the time. Ashok, when we got married, she died in 1983. Died very young. Anyway, coming to this emergency, this time it is not mistaken identity, that is for sure. Why they have arrested me, I can go into that, but that is something that I cannot discuss, so I'm not going to do that. So I think we'll leave that out. But yes, this time the fact that NewsClick was the one which was targeted, and targeting started from New York Times in US, because you seem to have a left view of the world in which we challenge the hegemony of the United States. And then, of course, they are very unhappy with anything that challenges US hegemony. You see, US hegemony is also very peculiar. It's a hegemony which is weakening. And when you weaken, then you are more dangerous than when you are strong. So currently that is the US position. They're losing their hegemony over the world. Talking about the rule-based order and so on, but you can see that is weakening the world over. You can see in Israel, they're isolated. In Ukraine, they thought they'll be able to bring Russia to its knees very quickly. It didn't work. They have sanctioned China on the question of trade, also exports, technology sanctions, all of that. But at the same time, Chinese economy is growing faster than the US economy is. And also the trade with the rest of the world, with Russia or with China, continues. India's biggest trade partner is still China. So given all of that, the problem is they're losing the economic hegemony of the world. And at the end of it, if Africa, Asia reject this hegemony, then that's about 80% of the world. Europe doesn't count, since Russia is anyway out of that. Okay, so it really means, and Latin America, these are the three continents which today are rejecting the European and what I call the settler colonial hegemony. Ex-colonial, settler colonial powers hegemony. And that's what is really driving a lot of what you see today. So I think this is the larger picture in which you have to also see why a newspaper like New York Times should have decided to pick on NewsClick, which is really something at the international level must be considered really something insignificant. So that it's a crack in the world of information which they think they should control. And any crack seems to be a danger for them. It's a sign of weakness, it's not a sign of strength.
Does it make you happy?
Yes, but it doesn't make me happy that it's directed against me.
No, the thought that you have the power to niggle such a huge power.
So I wouldn't put my power as such, but I said that weakening of their power is what matters. And remember, when the emperor has no clothes story, that was a little boy, who shouted, the emperor has no clothes, and that destroyed him. Okay.
So NewsClick is that little boy.
Well, I will say, when you are that fragile and that stupid, then I think any voice which says the truth is that of the little boy.
How did the legacy media react to your arrest? Did they stand by you? As far as I know, Press Council of India did not issue any statement supporting you. So, well, quite a few, of course, did. Large number of people did, but what about
See, the ones who did support me, the journalists,
Yes.
the press clubs did, the journalists did. In fact, the Women's Press Corps in Delhi was very active in this. Various journalist organizations came out, and that's expected, that they were the ones who would support me. The Press Council is run by big media again, and big media's stake is not to fight with the government, but to collaborate with it, and also the interest of capital. And the interest of capital is not with the people. So those are the clear reasons why a press council would not be active on these issues. Unless they really push to their backs to the wall, they wouldn't say anything. Remember during when you see the famous Advani statement
Yes.
that you crawl when you're only asked to bend. That is your leadership of the media, which is the ones who own the media, not the ones who write, not the editors, but those who own the media. But by and large, the journalist community came out very actively in my support, and that was heartening because I was an outsider to their field.
Yes.
You see, I had come laterally with running an organization, and therefore I could be called, if you will, not a journalist but an owner. Okay, so there was that kind of also tensions. But I think there were, without any doubt, you had also DigiPub, the digital platforms. Everybody came and endorsed that what was happening to me was wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that was very, very heartening. The fact that they could not make me as if I'm completely isolated and I'm some kind of XYZ doing wrong stuff, that story did not sell because of the solidarity I received from the journalist community and their organizations. So I really think that made a huge difference.
Your pen has always been anti-establishment. Were you expecting this harassment and incarceration given that the recent or the present dispensation in Delhi is very unforgiving towards anyone who does not toe their line?
I would not call me anti-establishment. I'd say pro-people. Okay, so
An intelligent way of putting things.
because you see, we should not define our identity as anti-something.
Mhm.
Because an anti-identity could be also a complete crackpot.
Mhm.
Okay, so you have to define yourself for what you are, not what you are against. Okay, the negative is not a very good way of defining you. Okay, so that's why I'm making this point that I would like to be known for what I am, not what I'm against. Okay, that's not what defines me. So that is one part of it that I think I would like to put forward. So what keeps me going? Again, you have to read my book, which I hope you will, and you will see I've dealt with why I came to political movements that I did, and I also chose the currents which I thought aligned with the people, not only in terms of physical presence, but also in terms of ideology and outlook. And therefore I have been a lifelong, not lifelong, but from my student days, with the left and with the CPIM and the various organizations. And when we built the People Science movement, it was again not built for being an organ of the party, as somebody would say, but it was built that we need to have a scientific outlook to the world. And we also have to analyze power and the policies that are being enacted in this country from the standpoint of science and technology, whether they are correct for the people, whom does it benefit, what are the pros and cons of this. And this analysis is something which means demystify science and technology and be able to popularize science and also bring to the people a scientific consciousness of what constitutes policy. And science and technology are very big parts of it today. So I think those are the things with which we started the science movement as one of the founders of the Delhi Science Forum along with others. And though the KSSP is an earlier organization and it has dealt with popularization science in mother tongue and so on, but four or five of these organizations, we did the science jathas in the mid-80s and then early 90s, and that led to the formation of the All India People Science Network. So all of this was not simply carrying on left consciousness and building a platform, but to identify what is it that we need to carry to the people regarding science and technology, and how any science and technology policy should involve the people as well. So that was the fundamental vision with which we built, or we were a part of the science popularization movement and also the science and technology movement, of which the free software movement is a part.
I think the media has changed over the years.
It's a very good question. It's not that India has changed because India has to change continuously. The world is changing continuously. Change is inherent in any society at any time. The question is, what has changed which we do not like? What is the change we might like? And what we do not like is the fact that you see regressive features in our society coming out in a way they did not do before. And what are the regressive forces? Regressive forces which tend to identify the nationhood with a certain religious identity, that the nation should be coupled to Hindu identity, and that was the Savarkar project, really. And that project today manifests itself in different ways. One of it, of course, is to paint Savarkar as a great national hero. Yes, he had a role in the national movement when it started. It's also true he compromised to the British at one point, and also true that his view of the nation, of what a nation should be, was clearly a Hindu nation. So he was, he also said that my Hindutva has nothing to do with Hindu religion. But leaving all of that out, because that's really a much larger topic, the question is a narrow definition of the nation by which nation belongs to only one set of people and not the other, also then doesn't make you face up to the fact, well, this identity, was this a homogeneous identity? You have different sections of the people who were within the Hindu fold, but didn't have rights that others did. And that we know was a long battle of caste divisions, dealing with different sections of the people differently, and pernicious things like untouchability. So all of that we have to take into account when you talk about how or why an identity is important. And therefore a identity of the Indian nation cannot bring to only one community or one section of the people. It has to belong to everybody. Of course, we will say it doesn't belong to the rich. It doesn't belong to the really those who today can spend 100 crores on a marriage.
5,000 crores.
5,000 crores on a marriage. Sorry, missed a couple of zeros there. Okay. So those are the kind of things that we have to say. What does it mean to have an identity as a nation? And that identity cannot be sectarian, it cannot be narrow. It must be something that any Indian should be able to aspire to be a part of that nation, and therefore has to be inclusive. Cannot exclude communities, cannot exclude the poor. As Ambedkar says when he was talking about the Constitution, you cannot give people rights, and then if they're so poor that they cannot exercise those rights, that is not therefore a right that has been given to them, which is worth something for the people. So we have to address the question of economic justice, not just social justice.
Mainstream media nowadays, they are by and large owned by the big corporates. Do you think the alternative media will be able to withstand that onslaught?
First is, I don't want to call them mainstream media. I want to call them big media owned by big money, big capital. So, is that possible to combat? Good question. Okay. Do we have an alternative? No, we have to combat it. Because we don't want them to decide what is news. If we decide what is news, then a marriage of one family's daughter is the biggest news in India. Okay, but that is not news. Hundreds of people dying of hunger, it's not news. So those are the kind of things we have to address. I don't want to call them mainstream and us as alternate. I will still say there is big media and there is people's media, and there are all other kinds of media as well. The question again is, you can define media in terms of print, television, and internet, digital platforms. So yes, you can have a technical division of media, but I don't think we should call ourselves alternate. Alternate to what? Exactly. So you are defining our existence by them. Okay? So I think that's a wrong way of framing it. Why should I define my existence that I'm anti what he is? I stand for something. So that has to be what I think is, that's why I'm calling it. You can say people's media versus big capitalist media. You can find other names for it. You know? But you will define it in some way, which is positive for you. Not that I am anti them. I'm not anti them. I think they're anti people.
Yes.
So I think that is how we have to define ourselves. Then the question becomes how to do it. That becomes a matter of technology, that becomes a matter of mobilization and so forth, a matter of organization. Don't forget, Comrade Lenin, when he started the Bolshevik party, he started the most important part was Iskra, spark. Why was that? Because it was going to be the organizer of the people as well. Okay. He didn't say I'm doing Iskra as an alternate to other media. He said this is organizing the people for revolution. I think that is the vision we need to have.
What is your idea or your opinion about this new bill that the Modi government is about to bring, which is the Broadcasting Services Regulation Bill 2023?
Well, if earlier version was put in public domain, there has been some discussion on that. This version is no longer not in public domain.
Yes.
It's only given to select people, and they are not been told not to make it public. So it's too early for us to comment. But the earlier bill, broadly speaking, is meant to apply to anybody who uses digital platforms. Since everybody nowadays uses digital platform in some way or the other. So if you are having 50 views, then nothing will happen to you. But if you have 5,000, 10,000 views, then you are supposed to be digital media.
Okay.
That's the way it seems to be definitionally moving, and therefore the ability to regulate all of them. The problem that the Modi government has, that deciding how to stop people, they can create more and more instruments. They don't have the machinery to impose it on the people like this, because protests, humor, making fun of your rulers, criticizing your rulers, that's a right the people have always exercised. Now, it's another matter, they did it in the tea stall, they did it in the, somewhere in the local platform, put up a play or something. When we were young, we used to say Durga Puja used to be plays, okay? And all these kinds of social outlets were there. Now one of the big social outlets is social media. So you say that also comes under broadcasting. Do you have the ability to control that? Do you have the instruments to control that? I think it doesn't. I think this is overreach at a scale which is impossible for them to implement. And I think that's where this government is going to fail. That it wants to control the people, but as I think, who was it who wrote that? Shelley, the English poet, wrote that ye are many, they are few.
Yeah.
And I think that is the lesson that they forget.
What is your opinion about the media of West Bengal, where we find that the Chief Minister from a public forum platform, she gives orders that so and so newspaper or so and so magazine can be kept in government libraries and so media cannot be kept, or the kind of what shall I say, the kind of diktats that are there on the media. How is it different from the Noida media? How is...
The big difference is patronage was always there. Making such statements shows a certain lack of diplomacy, shall I say, intelligence we can say, but it is very much government policy and we know it. And it's always been there. I don't think our papers, when we were young, were kept in government libraries. Deshi, I don't think entered the government library. So this, I think we have to take it as a given. But the problem with TMC, Mamata Banerjee, is the crudity with which it is being done. The sophistication, quote unquote, isn't there. But it doesn't mean the government is really different. Governments do exercise this kind of wanton display of power, by which only some things are allowed and others are not allowed. Problem is not that. We know how to fight that. The problem comes when you write something and you are in jail. That's your basic fundamental right to freedom of speech, guaranteed under the Constitution as 1901. So that, and it is of course circumscribed by 1902, but then what is circumscribed by are relatively big things we have to do, and then you can at least have the access to courts for doing it, though if it comes under UAP, as you know, it takes much longer, or PMLA. So all those things at least are different. So I think the problem here is not that a lot of these leaders who are fighting even the BJP are democratic, they're not. But the question is, who is the thrust? What is the main thrust today? Is those who have the ability to change the Constitution, use the central government's enormous power that it has, and also change the way, the relationship between the central government and the states are to be decided. So these are the major, I think, constitutional issues where Mamata Banerjee has been authoritarian, her instincts have been authoritarian. We know that. We were in the student movement at the time when she was still emerging, and she was at the time in the Congress. But I think in the current times, the issue is really those who can change the fabric of society and who can mobilize people at scale, which will have generational impacts, and those who are trying to change the basic structure of this constitution itself to adhere to a vision which is not what we fought for when we fought for independence against the British. And I think that's a much bigger battle we have. Yes, short answer is Mamata Banerjee democratic? No. She has always been authoritarian as well. But that authoritarianism is different from the kind of authoritarianism which has an ideological framework, which tries to change how people think. And I think the battle is how people think about themselves, society, and our future. And I think that is the key battle.
My last question to you. Do you think the condensed verdict this time would help in easing pressure on journalists and other dissidents?
You know, it's a difficult question to answer because the new Samhita is going to come, and it seems to have, it has the potential for tightening the screws on everybody. Does the government have the instruments to deliver what it wants to do via the Samhita? I deeply doubt it, because I think there's a complete administrative overreach in the way the things are being framed. They don't even have the instruments of repression that they will really require if they want to carry it through. Forget against us, against also common criminals, the way they are framing all of this. So I think we're going to see a lot more problems, that it might jam the courts, it might give certain powers to the police, which it has to be then fought back through various means. So all those problems are there. But you know, one thing is, democracy is not protected by laws. It is not protected by the courts. It's really protected finally by the people. And what I have written in my, I'm sorry to continuously talk about my book, what I've talked about in my book about 1977, that the Indian people did teach Mrs. Gandhi a lesson. And anybody who wants to bring, by hook or by crook, an authoritarian dictatorial government will learn that that's not easy. And in the last election we have seen that a partial lesson has been given. Now whether the government learns it or it doesn't, and how the people will react, that will determine for the, at least the immediate future, the future of this country.
Thank you so much, Comrade, for speaking with us. And you've learned a lot. I'm sure the audience will also learn a lot of things from you, from what you've said, and we are really grateful to you for giving us so much time. Thank you, everybody.